All right, today we're tackling a really tough subject, but we're going to look at it from a totally different angle, one that comes straight out of a physics textbook. We're talking about the physics of addiction. I know what you're probably thinking. What on earth does Newton's first law have to do with something as human and complex as addiction? Well, it turns out the connection is surprisingly literal. It gives us this incredible framework for understanding why it's so hard to break free. So let's dive in. Okay, so first things first, we got to start with the basic concept, right? An object in motion stays in motion. It's like the universe's default setting. Things just resist change. And you know this feeling, right? It's inertia. Think about a huge freight train. It takes forever to get it going, but once it's barreling down the tracks, man, it takes a massive force to slow it down. It wants to keep doing what it's doing. And that idea, that resistance to change, is our starting point here. But here's the kicker, and this is what's so wild. This isn't just some clever metaphor we're using. The parallel to Newton's law is, well, it's incredibly literal. These forces, inertia, momentum, they're actually at play inside the human body and brain. It's real. So, okay, if the body is this object in motion, what keeps it moving down that path? Well, in addiction, the body basically finds a whole new center of gravity. It builds up this powerful biological momentum. See, your body is usually this incredible balancing act. It's got this process called homeostasis. Think of it like a thermostat. If you get too hot, you sweat to cool down. Too cold, you shiver to warm up. It's always trying to get back to its happy, stable baseline. But addiction comes in and just completely hijacks that whole system. It changes the rules. That natural resting state gets thrown out the window. Suddenly, the new normal, the new baseline that the body is desperately trying to maintain is having the substance on board. The body doesn't just put up with the substance, It actually weaves it into its everyday operations. It becomes part of the machinery. And this creates what you can think of as a huge biological mass. The addiction literally has weight now. It has momentum. It's an object in motion. Okay, so that's the body side of the story, this massive physical momentum. But what about the brain? What's going on up there? Well, that's where we run into something called the path of least resistance. You have to remember, our brains are basically lazy. I mean, they're designed for efficiency. They want to save energy wherever they can. So when you do something over and over, the brain builds a shortcut, a neural superhighway, so it doesn't have to think so hard next time. It's always looking for the easy way out. And this is such a perfect way to picture the two paths the brain sees. On one hand, you have addiction. That's like a marble rolling down a deep, smooth groove that's been carved out over years. It takes zero effort, just whoosh. But on the other hand, you have sobriety. And that's like trying to push a giant, heavy crate across a splintery, rough floor. It takes a huge amount of energy just to get it to budge an inch. And that right there explains this strange idea of the comfort of the known. It's not that the brain wants the disaster. Of course not. It's just choosing the path of least resistance. It's choosing the low-energy option, even if that path is headed straight for a cliff. The brain would rather deal with a familiar crisis than expend the massive energy it takes to carve out a brand new, unfamiliar path. So, with all that momentum, all that inertia, what happens when someone finally says enough and tries to stop it? What happens when they apply an outside force? Well, you get a collision, a big one. And this brings us right back to Newton, his third law, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The action here is willpower, the desire to change. But the reaction? Oh man, the reaction is the full force of that biological momentum pushing back. And that pushback has a name, withdrawal, and it is brutal. And the physics here are just unforgiving. The more mass that addiction has built up, the longer it's been going on, the deeper it's integrated, the more crushing that reaction force is going to feel. And that's so important to understand. It's not a failure of character. It's a physical collision. Okay, so if a head-on crash is just so brutal and frankly often doesn't work, what's the alternative? Well, the cool thing is, this whole physics analogy also shows us a much smarter way forward. It's not about a sudden, violent stop. It's about slowly, carefully, changing the momentum. Think back to that freight train. You can't stop it by building a brick wall in front of it. That's just a disaster. But you can stop it by applying the brakes. It's a smaller force, but it's applied consistently over a long period of time. In physics, that's called impulse. And it's how you change the momentum of a massive object without everything blowing up. And that gives us a really powerful and much more hopeful model for recovery. So instead of trying for that one big, violent stop, the goal is to apply small, consistent forces over time. We're talking about things like therapy, building new habits, maybe medication, having a support system. All these little forces, applied day after day, slowly begin to recalibrate the whole system, gently shifting that momentum back toward a healthy, stable place. So that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. If addiction really does operate under these predictable physical laws, like inertia and momentum, then couldn't we use that understanding to, to engineer better, more compassionate, and just plain more effective ways to help people recover? Just looking at the problem differently doesn't magically solve it, but it might just be the thing that shows us exactly where to start building the road out.